Hello everyone, it's time for another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile, this time on my updated DDD deck profile post-Battle Chaos. After waiting for a long time, I've been craving for some DDD support because DDDs is one of my favorite design archetypes. Using every single summoning method other than links at the time, or in this case now, just rituals, because we're using pendulums instead, but okay. But anyway, I like DDDs because of that. You have every summoning methods. I also like the design that it's based on historical figures from the past. We got the Savants who are based on scientists. We got the Kings that are based on historic conquerors. I just love it. And now with the new Battle Chaos stuff, it adds more consistency to the deck. Because one thing that DDDs always had a problem with is basically consistency to make even more plays. Although it's not like you can't really make plays with just few pieces. But this is an absurdly combo heavy deck. Because playstyles technically have every single different summoning method on your field so you can control the board. Hence the dominance of the Kings. That's basically the playstyle of the deck. And overall, it's very combo heavy because there's a lot of different triggers and special summon effects. And you basically have to treat every single monster piece and even some of your spells and traps, basically the Dark Contracts, as another combo piece. And depending on what combo piece you get, it makes a certain type of play. So it is a very complex deck to play, and it's very common that when you play this deck, if you can make all the combos correctly, you're going to end up with 5 boss monsters on the field. And yeah, it is very common. And it really just has a lot of cards that just combo off from each other, especially a lot of play extensions as well. And now with the new support cards, it basically just extends the play even further and also adds more consistency to it. Yeah, I've been craving DDD support. I'm just a little disappointed that we just didn't get another synchro, because I would really like a synchro guy on a chair. But anyway, as you can tell, I have the regular Armageddon right here, and that's because I built this deck to be a little more anime-like, so I basically have all the main DDD lineup that Reiji used, because anime reasons. I love my deck to be much more like anime-like. I play this deck and tend to be much more fun than much more competitive, I'm going to admit it. But anyway, let's begin. So first off, let's start off with the non-Pendulum Monsters, because Pendulum Monsters have way too much effects, and that's one reason why I hate Pendulum, but hey, you don't have to play Pendulum with this one, but Pendulums just help a lot. But anyway, we're going to start off with DD Swirl Slide. This is going to be very important for your startup play, because it lets you fusion summon by using itself along with another DD monster from your hand to send it to the graveyard for a fusion summon. But the second effect is just an extensive play, which also really helps out a lot, where you can banish it from your graveyard to special summon a DD monster from your hand. And remember, every summon you make is an extensive play, and it triggers a lot of plays with that. And yeah, that just makes it really powerful. And then we go to the polar opposite, Synchro Slime, where you fusion summon with the graveyard by banishing itself and along with another material. More extensive play, obviously you must run it. And then for even more plays, DD Lamia. If this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can send 1 Dark Contract or 1 DD monster from your hand or field to the graveyard to special summon it, but when it leaves the field, you banish it. It's also a level 1 tuner, so that's going to be important. It's a very essential key piece to make your level 7 and level 8 play most of the time. And sometimes you could go for level 9, but I don't run any level 9s in this deck. And then DD Ghost. It's a level 2 tuner, which is actually the main reason why I run this. But if sent to the graveyard, you can select 1 DD or Dark Contract card from your graveyard and then send another copy from your deck to the graveyard. Really helps out to get another material from your graveyard. And also when it's banished, you can return 1 DD card or Dark Contract that is banished back to the graveyard. It really helps out. But mainly it's a level 2 turner, which could make your level 10 plays much easier. And then a card that I decided to tech in, DD Night Howling. Because when this card is normal summon, you can special summon 1 DD monster from your graveyard, but its attack is 0, and you take 1,000 points of damage if it's still on the field at the end phase. It's basically a 1 card that could summon another one, which will enable you a link play, or even a synchro play, because it is a tuner, and I have managed to make decent plays with it. But it's not the most important card, as you already have quite a good amount of summonings and even normal summon targets in many cases. So, and this is normally a card that you don't start out with either. So you could technically take this out, but it's there if you want to use it. And then to the Pendulum Monsters. First off, the most important Pendulum Monster of the deck that you must run Abyss Ragnarok. We're going to start off with the kings. So first off, the Pendulum Effect. So when you special summon a DDD monster, you can special summon another DDD monster from your graveyard, but you take 1,000 points of damage and your opponent's damage is half during the turn. This is here to extend plays, and if you go first, well, the half damage doesn't really matter. It's here for extending plays, but ideally you don't want to use this too much because halving the damage can kind of hurt sometimes. But nonetheless, it's here to extend plays. Especially the main monster effect, where it's normal special summon, you can special summon a DDD monster from your graveyard. And being a level 8, you could summon another level 8, but that's not going to really happen most of the time, because you want to make your insane plays. And then his other effect, where you will sometimes use just to clear your board, is that you contribute one other monster on the field, and then target one monster your opponent controls and banish it. You do have graveyard effects, so that's not a big deal. But what's most important about this card is that it makes a lot of plays. Especially when you go for Swirl Slime and then Swirl Slime Banish, and then you special this, and then you can special that. Yeah, a lot of triggering happening here. And then to the other king, I do run the one Armageddon because anime boss monster, so I have to run it. It's also a 3k beat stick that could be even more. But anyway, to the Pendulum Effect is that you can target one DD monster you control and it gets 1,000 attack into the turn. Not important, it's here to be a 3k beat stick for the monster effect, and sometimes it can run over monsters with that effect. Because first of all, this card is unaffected by any spells and traps that do not target. It's not bad. And then your other effect is that when your other DD monster has been destroyed, it gets the attack equal to the destroyed monster, but it cannot attack directly during the turn, which can be very helpful to run over monsters, and in some cases, it's very good for defensive purposes if your opponent decides to go against another monster first. So there is also that. I mean, it's not too bad to Pendulum summon a 3k beat stick, okay? And also anime boss monster reasons. And then for manga boss monster reasons, here's La Place. It's a one-of, okay, it's pretty good. First off, Pendulum Effect, you can return one DDD. Yes, you have 3Ds, remember that one. Face up from your extra deck back to your hand. Return a Pendulum Monster from your extra deck to your hand, not bad, especially you got Ragnarok, but you do have a better card for that. You mainly use this for the monster effect. For one, it cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no damage from it, because you have to look at it right now, it's a question mark attack. And that's because when this card battles an opponent's monster during the damage step, it becomes double of that monster's attack. At least for the first battle it does, because it also activates on your opponent's turn. And you take no damage from it, and it also does piercing. So this is basically just really good to run over anything, hence why I just decided to run this. Because sometimes there are monsters that can be very insane attack. So having something just to run over anything can be very helpful, especially if you cannot really get rid of it through card effects. So just the one-up is good enough. And then for another tech option, you don't really have to run this. DDD Divine Zero King Reiji, because the original name is Reiji. I don't know why they changed it to Rage. I get that they changed Reiji to Declan for some reason, but this is basically Reiji. So it's a Pendulum skill 0, and it has a pretty decent Pendulum effect. Because first off, any effect damage you would first take during a turn becomes 0. So if you have a bunch of Dark Contracts on the field, which sometimes you will, it will negate all the damage. Because one of the other things about DDDs is that you have to pay a cost for every contract you make. So that's basically, hence the King's Treaty. And then the other part of the Pendulum Effect is that if you would tribute summon for a monster, you can summon it without tributing. Can be very helpful sometimes, especially when you're trying to summon Ragnarok. So you do have that. I do use this for a Gilgamesh target sometimes. And then the main monster effect is that, first off, if your opponent has 4,000 or less life, this card becomes equal to their attack. That can be very helpful because of his other effect, where you can tribute one monster and then activate one of these effects. It could either attack your opponent directly, negate your opponent's spells or traps, or your opponent can activate cards effects from their hand or graveyard. So yeah, that can completely shut down your opponent sometimes, and sometimes tributing another monster isn't bad, because sometimes you really do want to clear your board just to make more plays. So it's not bad to do that. It is here sometimes for OTK reasons, because being equal to your opponent's life basically guarantees a kill, and sometimes even making your opponent cannot activate their cards is also very nasty. So overall, it's a tech option. You don't have to run it. Yes, it does still require your 2 tributes, but luckily with cards like Swirl Slime, you don't need to worry about that. And it's not hard to Pendulum summon a Ragnarok anyway, so having this for Swirl Slime special summon isn't bad at all. And then to the scientists. First off, the most important scientist in the deck, DD Savin Kepler. Pendulum Effect, it cannot be negated, so this is going to be one of the contracts with them, where during the standby phase, you decrease the pendulum scale by 2. It is a pendulum scale 10, so that's pretty good, but the decrease by 2 can hurt sometimes, but sometimes you will use it for the pendulum scale, just for a pendulum summon for a turn, so it isn't entirely too bad, but just be aware of that. But the main monster effect is that when this card is no more special summon, you can add 1 dark contract from your deck to your hand, or return 1 DD card on your field back to your hand. Most of the time, you're going to be adding Dark Contract to your hand because that just basically enables plays, hence why you run 3 for the consistency. It's one of your essential startup pieces usually as well, which is another reason why to run 3. And then another one that is not really important anymore, but it's still pretty good, is Sovereign Copernicus. So first off, Pendulum Effect, you can only Pendulum summon DDD monsters, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But you can also negate all the damage of spells, and then destroy it after the negation, which is fine, but you're not really going to do that with this, because you're going to use the monster effect most of the time, where when this card is no more special summon, you can Foolish Burial 1 DD card from your deck. That basically makes a play right there, but sometimes it's not that great, and you do have better summoning targets, but it is there to make your plays. It's just an alternate way for other searching. And then, to the polar opposite, Savant Newton. It's a pendulum scale of 10. That's actually one of the main reasons why I decided to use this, because this doesn't decrease its scale, which is good. It's basically the same pendulum effect as Copernicus, except it's for traps. That's not really going to happen most often, but pendulum scale of 10 is mainly the reason why for that part. But its main monster effect can also be very helpful, because you could send it to the graveyard from hand, and return 1 dark contract from your graveyard to your hand, which can actually make some comeback. But mainly just here for pendulum scale of 10. And because, like I said before, you do some pendulum summon in this deck. Not too often, but you do it. And then to Thomas, where Pendulum Effect, which is the one that you mainly will use most of the time, where you can return 1 DD card from your extra deck back to your hand. Yes, Pendulum Monster. So that's just very good. You could get back your Kepler, because most of the time Kepler will be in the extra deck, and you can do Pendulum Summon with it, because Kepler scale 10, hence why that can be helpful. You can also return the Kepler and then normal summon it. You do have that. So you do have plays. You could return Ragnarok and then special summon it if you have another Swirl Slide. Lots of things. Main monster effect, you're not going to use it as much, but you can destroy 1 pendulum scale that is a DD monster, and then you can special summon 1 level 8 DDD monster from your deck, but its effects are negated, your opponent's damage is half, and it has to be on defense. This is fine, because sometimes that does extend plays, and it does go for a rank A play. Unfortunately, there's only 1 monster you can go for it with this, but most of the time you're not going to summon that monster too often unless you really need to negate a whole board. Just saying. And then, one other tech card I decided to run is Ouroboros. I was thinking about running Apocalypse instead, but Ouroboros has proven some use because, 1, it's a level 4 tuner. That does help. And its Pendulum Effect is that you can target 1 dark contract you control along with 1 spell and trap your opponent controls and destroy them. Sometimes destroying the dark contract really helps because you don't want to get burned. But it's mainly here for the monster effect, where when you take effect damage, you can special summon it from your hand. Which is very helpful because, yes, 1, it's a level 4, so you can actually make an Exceed play with a rank 4. And being a level 4 tuner and summoning Temjin Lock, which is a level 6, you can go for a level 10 play. And it also special summons itself, which is also very helpful. And you do burn yourself during the main phase sometimes, and not during your standby phase, so being able to special summon this isn't exactly too hard. But you could technically take this out for any other card. I personally run it because it does help extend plays. And then finally, to the new card from Battle of Chaos, Deity Griffin. So first off, Pendulum Effect, you can target 1 monster you control, and then it gets 500 attack for every continuous spell or trap with different names on your field, and you can only use this effect card once per turn. Yeah, your dark contracts are continuous spells and traps. You're not going to really use this. You're going to be using this for the monster effect, where you control a DD monster, you could special summon it from hand. That itself is already good because that just extends your play. And it is a level 4, and harder once per turn, but yeah, level 4, you can make a rank 4 play. Which now, because of this card, I started running back the rank 4 Caesar. Because summoning Caesar has become so much easier, and Caesar is good fodder for many things. But its second effect, where if it's Pendulum Summon, you can discard 1 card, and then draw a card, and you don't really do that. But the third effect, where when it's special summoned from the graveyard, which you will do quite often actually, because Swirl Slide can still send it to the graveyard, and special summoning from the graveyard is pretty prominent, you can add one DD monster from your deck to your hand. The two effects that adds extra consistency: special summon itself, and add a DD card from your deck to your hand. That extends so much plays for this deck that this is just an automatic 3 of. No questions asked right there. Especially this being a level 4 also lets you make a Caesar, which is another special summon which could trigger more plays, which is why this is a must play for this deck. So that's the monster lineup. And now to the spells. So first off, to the Dark Contracts, this is a must play at 3. Dark Contracts with the Gate. So this is your DD Searcher. That's basically what it is. And it's a continuous spell, so every standby phase, like all the other Dark Contracts, you must make a payment. This one burns you for 1,000 life points. And of course, you can always negate that burn or just send this to the graveyard through other means, because there are ways to do that. But you mainly use this because this is your consistency searcher, so you do want to see this as soon as possible. And this ends up being a key piece sometimes, because sending a Dark Contract from the field to the graveyard can end up being a key piece, especially for Lamia. And then for another essential Dark Contract, but you don't really need to run 2 of anymore, but I still like to run 2 just in case, is Swamp King. So this card lets you fusion summon from hand, field, or banish monster from your graveyard to perform a fusion summon. That's really good right there, and no questions why not to run it. I just have the second one just in case, so you could draw it sooner just to make another play. And sometimes it is quite essential for you to have it as soon as you can, because sometimes you do break, but it's not bad. And then to the new Dark Contract, which is also a field spell, Patient License. So first off, this is actually a new field spell that kind of locks your opponent, because when your opponent summons a monster that has the same summoning method as one that you have on the field, other than Ritual anyway, and Pendulum, your opponent takes 1,000 points of damage, so you force your opponent to make a payment. And for the rest of the turn, even if this card leaves the field, your opponent cannot summon monsters with that same monster type for the rest of the turn. So if they summon a fusion monster, they cannot summon fusion monsters for the rest of the turn unless this was already out of the field. Yeah, it's just really good. It can lock your opponent unless if your opponent gets rid of this beforehand, and it basically forces them to not be able to climb up monsters, which is very nasty sometimes. And then if this card gets destroyed by card effect, you can add one DD card from your graveyard or from face up your extra deck back to your hand, which just happens sometimes, but this is basically DDD lock, which I do like. And what's good is that this is updated compared to the Shadow one, because the Shadow one only affects everything but not Link. This one also affects the Link monster as well, which is also very good. But this is not too important. It is just fun to draw it, but you're not really going to search for this most of the time unless if you already used up all your other Dark Contracts. So this is basically the last Dark Contract you're going to be searching if you're ever going to be searching for something, or if you already have everything all set up that you could basically just lock your opponent with. And then I do play the One Foolish Burial because you do have a lot of graveyard effect, and this is basically just another search, so of course 1 for 1, because discarding your card is not bad for graveyard effects, but also you do have good numbers of level 1s in this deck, especially Lamia and Kepler. And because your whole main deck is dark, go ahead and run Allure of Darkness and Pot of Desires, because like I said before, this deck is really key piece heavy, and that's one of the reasons why I run multiple copies of certain cards, because you don't want to end up accidentally banishing them. So just extra draw power just really helps out for your plays. So that's it for the main deck lineup. Now to the extra deck lineup. So first off, one of your most important startup plays now is DDD Abyss King Gilgamesh. Back to the Kings. So first off, Gilgamesh requires 2 DDD monsters, which is fine. And now you do have a way to get rid of the Kepler without just leaving it randomly on the field. So first off, when this card is link summoned, you can choose 2 Pendulum Monsters from your deck and put them in the Pendulum scale, and then you take 1,000 points of damage after that. Which is fine sometimes, because you do activate some effects like Ouroboros, and in some cases you could just put the Reiji there and then you don't even take 1,000 damage burn. And the search for 2 Pendulum scales really helps out a lot, because it could be Ragnarok and just free plussing is just good. But its other effect where you're not really going to use it as much, where if it's destroyed by battle or by card effect by your opponent, you can special summon 1 DDD monster from your extra deck in defense. This is fine, you're not going to really do this most of the time, but it's there. You mainly use it for the link summon effect to get your 2 pendulum scales. And then, to continue off, the most important fusion card in the deck. Flame King Temujin, or Genghis, whatever you want to call him, but I'm going to call him by the Japanese version, Temujin. So, it requires 2 DD monsters, Swirl Slide, and then it's effect that you're going to be using almost all the time, where when you special summon another DD monster, you can special summon another DD monster from your graveyard. Like I said, you're going to be triggering a lot of effects just by special summoning, and this is just an example of it. And this just becomes a combo piece because of it. That's why I run 2. And sometimes the second one is also for the rank 6 play, because I do run the rank 6 here. And the second effect is that if this card is destroyed by your opponent, you can return 1 Dark Contract from your graveyard back to your hand, which is fine. Most of the time that's not going to happen, you just use it for the special summon effect. And it's also the most important startup play that you're going to need. And then, to his evolved form, Flame High King Executive Temujin, because I like to add the executive from the Japanese one. So it requires 1 level 5 or higher DD monster along with 1 other DD monster. That's fine. And it's not hard to do that with Swirl Slime, sometimes even with Necro Slime, because you're going to set up your graveyard. So basically it's the same thing as Temujin to special summon 1 from the graveyard, except that it can also trigger when you normal summon. And being a level 8, that basically gives you a rank 8 play right there as well. But it also has an added effect where once per turn, you can negate 1 face-up spell or trap until the next standby phase. This is important sometimes because, remember, your dark contracts do burn you every 1,000 points every standby phase, and if you do need to use this effect, you can negate the dark contract burn so you don't die from it. But the spell trap negation is just really good as well. Of course, what's important about this one is that it just does more special summon, extending plays, and it's also level 8, giving you rank 8 plays. And then to the fusion boss monster, DDD Ultimate Doom King Purplish Armageddon, because I'm going to stick with the OCG name and it sounds better. So first off, if your fusion monster battles an opponent's monster, for the Pendulum Effect, you can make that monster lose 1,000 attack. Not important. The important part is the monster effect, where first off, you do need to use 2 DDD monsters to summon it. Not hard, but the actual effect is that once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, destroy it, and burn them half the damage equal to that monster's attack. Very decent. And then the other effect is that if your opponent's monster battles during the damage calculation, if it's higher than its own original attack, you can reduce it back to the original attack. That does help out sometimes, especially that it does require quite a good number of attack boosts just to run over some of this stuff. So Access Code Talker, for example, is just going to be reduced back to 2,300, which can be very nice. The only thing I hate is that the real life version got nerfed compared to the anime one, because the anime one had the extra effect where Pendulum Monster you control cannot be destroyed by battle. Because the idea was the ultimate portfolio where you have the 3 Armageddons with the summoning methods all will protect each other from any type of destruction. But they got rid of the not be destroyed by battle for some reason from the real one, and I was just disappointed of that. But other than that, it's still 3,500 attack, so it is hard to run over it. And it's not hard to fusion summon this, and it's pretty good. And then to the Synchros. First off, the most important Synchro and the very first Synchro for DDDs is Gus King Alexander. So first off, it requires 1 DD tuner and 1 or more non-tuners. If you don't more special summon, you can special summon 1 level 4 lower DD monster from your graveyard, hard once per turn. It's just there for more extensive plays. You can summon the Temujin, normal summon the Lamia, use Lamia with Temujin for level 7, and then summon this, and then you're going to be doing a lot more plays after that, and that's usually what you're going to do most of the time. So it's just here for making more plays, and it's mainly here when you're going first. And then for one of the boss monsters, Curse King Siegfried, requires 1 tuner and then 1 or more non-DDD tuners, and then once per turn, you can negate 1 face-up spell trap into the next standby phase. That's very helpful, and any type of negate is always good. It's just like Executive Temujin, but this one's the one that usually sticks on the field. And then the other effect is that if this card is destroyed, you gain 1,000 life points for every dark contract on the field. That usually doesn't really happen, I'm going to be very honest, because you usually end up sending all your dark contracts to the graveyard before you even get a chance to gain those life points back. but it's here as another good option. If you want, you could summon Crystal Wing instead, because you're normally going to summon Alexander and then just use Lamia to synchro for this. So you could summon Crystal Wing instead, except that some of your cards are restrictive to use summoning Fiend monsters for the rest of the turn. So why I just stick with Siegfried. And then we go to Gust High King Alexander, because this is a huge beater. And it's a level 10, hence why there's some tuners that I decide to run. So it has a generic summoning condition, but it's not a really generic card. So if you control 3 DDD monsters on the field, and that includes himself, it doubles its own original attack. So it becomes 6k, which beats over a lot of things, but it's not guaranteed. And then it's basically an upgrade version of himself, where you can now special summon any DD monster from your graveyard if you know more special summon. Like I said before, a lot of triggering effects happen in DDDs. And then this card is just not as great anymore, but just for anime reasons, I still run it. Whitest Armageddon, not Bright Armageddon like in the TCG. So Pendulum Effect. When your opponent declares an attack, you can target one synchro monster you control, and then your opponent destroys all monsters that has less defense than that monster's attack. And then you destroy all your opponent's monsters that has less defense than that monster's attack. And then your opponent also takes 1,000 points of damage for each one. That can be very helpful sometimes, and Synchros, you do use this quite often sometimes, although not as much. And then, for the main monster effect, first off, it requires DD monsters for this, for the summoning condition. And then, your opponent cannot target any monsters you control with card effects. That's pretty good protection, and it's also not linked to just Pendulum Monsters like the other Armageddons, especially in the anime reason. And then the main effect that would be good if your opponent summons Pendulums is where every time your opponent summons a monster, they choose one Pendulum monster they control and then negate all the other effects on their field other than that one selected monster. So against Pendulum decks, this card is definitely really good. But against no Pendulum decks, then your opponent has no target and you can't really do that. But you mainly use this for the no target by card effects ability. And one thing I did forget about from Purplish Armageddon is that when these Pendulum extra deck monsters get destroyed, they can go to the Pendulum Zone. And yeah, that's your way to put it there, but it's not. But it just depends on which one that you want. Usually, you don't really go for it. And now to the Exceed monsters. First off, the first Exceed monsters for DDD. That is still quite optional for you to summon, but it's now easy to summon just to trigger more stuff. So first off, we got Wave King Caesar. Requires 2 level 4 DDD monsters. And then you can detach one material, and then for all the monsters that were destroyed this turn get summoned back to the field. But you do take 1,000 points of damage for each one of them if they're still on the field at the end phase. This is fine sometimes, but you're not going to really do this. You're going to mainly use this for the second effect, because this is going to be fodder for many cards. Because if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add 1 Dark Contract from your deck to your hand. Like I said, it's going to be fodder for many things. You just summon this just to send it to the graveyard, get more searching. That's basically what you use this for. But it's also really easy to summon this now because you've got Griffin as our level 4, and summoning the 2 Griffins isn't even hard. You also got the Ouroboros I added in for that reason as well, just to add a little more consistency to it. So you have options with this. Especially because we got a new Exceed monster that could just make even further plays. And then to his evolved form, Executive Caesar requires 2 level 6, but this one has a completely different effect to the original one for some reason compared to the other 2 kings, where when your opponent would special summon a monster through a card effect other than its own effect, so basically a monster reborn, detach 1 material, it's not once per turn, negate that effect, and then this monster along with another monster gets plus 1800 attack. I don't know what's with the 1800 part other than anime reasons with Dark Worm, but that 1800 attack part is weird. But this not being a hard once per turn, that's just really good. And an extra power boost on top of that? Yeah, that's pretty good. And then the second effect is just the same as Base Form Caesar, where when this card is sent to the graveyard, you add a Dark Contract from your deck to your hand, which you do sometimes. And summoning this is actually not really hard anyway, especially with the Master Rule 4 revision that has been here for quite a while. So summoning this is not bad, especially because it's a good solemn effect. And then to one of your bigger boss monsters back in the day, Dual Dawn King Kali Yuga. Requires 2 DD monsters. Keep in mind it says DD, so you do have Thomas for this. And then when this card is summoned, you negate all other effects face up on the field. Yeah, you use this for the negation part, And the other effect can also be pretty good because once per turn, you can detach one material to heavy storm the field, which you will do sometimes, and you do want to get rid of your contracts. And then once per turn, you can detach a material to return one dark contract from your graveyard and set it back face down. Very helpful. Sometimes the heavy storm can be necessary, but especially negating the whole entire board sometimes. Unfortunately, your own cards will get negated by this too, but if it means negating your opponent's board, it's not too bad, especially when your whole field is actually filled with boss monsters with at least 3,000 attack usually, so it's not bad. And then to the main boss monster for DDDs, the Exceed Pendulum, Darkness Armageddon. So first off, Pendulum Effect, if you control another Pendulum scale, you can special summon one DD Exceed monster from your extra deck. Helps out sometimes, especially that special summoning can trigger a bunch of effects, so why not? But you're not going to use that too often. But the main monster effect is, first off, your Pendulum monsters on the field cannot be destroyed by card effect, which is really good protection right there. Combine that with the Whitest Armageddon, cannot target either, really good. And if you go by anime reasons, if you have the Purplish Armageddon, if they had that effect, Pendulum monsters cannot be destroyed by battle, so basically it cannot be destroyed by anything at that point. But for some reason they took that out of Purplish Armageddon, but whatever. But the other effect is that when this card is Exceed summoned, you can target one face-up Pendulum monster from your extra deck and put it as it for material. You do that sometimes, especially that there are some monsters that you just can't summon back, so you might just use it as material, so it could be in the graveyard so you can summon it back. And then the third effect, where it's basically the main effect, where you can detach one material, target one monster your opponent controls for every Pendulum monster you control. It has to be equal, by the way, and then destroy it. I hate the equal part, but you should be able to manipulate your field enough to be able to activate this effect without a problem. And a good field wipe isn't really bad at all. But I mainly run this because first off, it's easy to summon, and the fact that it can protect all your Pendulum monsters is also really good. And for anime reasons, I like to have all three Armageddons on my field. And it's not really hard for all three to get out. So yeah, I just run it. Finally, for the new boss monster on a chair that is not a Synchro, even though we already have Exceed guy on a chair, the Devising King Dukes Ex Machina. That's the OCG name, by the way. So first off, Pendulum Effect. It is a Pendulum Scale Fin, so it does have that use. But if you have another Pendulum monster on your other Pendulum scale, for the Pendulum Effect, you can special summon that Pendulum scale and then put one Pendulum monster from your graveyard or face up from the extra deck to that new Pendulum scale that you just swapped out for. Sometimes you will have another Armageddon on your other Pendulum scale, so just being able to summon that is not too bad. But you're not going to really use that most of the time, although it does trigger a bunch of effects, so it does help. And then for its actual effect, first off, you're never going to Exceed summon this card using it in its normal means, because it has an effect where you could literally special summon itself from the extra deck by Exceed summoning it on top of any DDD monster. It doesn't have to be an Exceed monster, which by default is basically like La Place, just without the search for it, because La Place can tribute a DDD monster to special summon it. And this one is basically the same thing, except you don't need to search it. That triggers a lot of effects. Yeah, that effect itself is already really good. But the other effect, which is one that you're going to be using quite often, is that you can either detach two materials or destroy one dark contract you control to negate a monster effect activation. Yeah, monster effect negate is just really good, especially before this card, we lacked monster negating because we only had spell and trap negating. But now with this, we just added a monster negating on top of it. It's fine, but the special summon part is the most important thing. And then the third effect. During your standby phase, you can pay this contract where you put this card in the Pendulum scale. You do that sometimes because it is Pendulum scale 10, but you mainly use this for that special summon along with the negating monster effect, because those two effects alone, it just makes this card just worth running as a 2-off. You don't have that much room in the extra deck, so you do have to cut this down a little bit, and most of the time you're not going to summon more than 2 anyway. It's mainly here for the special summon and the negating monster effect, because those two effects is just really good for this deck. Especially a deck that triggers a lot just by summoning monsters. Alright, before I end off this profile, I'm going to do one playtest video. As you can already see, I shuffle my deck and I draw in my hand. And I'm not going to know the end result because this deck really makes you have to think kind of far ahead if you want to know your end result. Because like I said, it's a very combo heavy deck. So I'm going to be making my plays here, and I'm going to do the best I can to make a good end play. So other than that, let's begin on the combo just to show how complex this deck can be. So first off, I'm going to summon the Kepler. So Kepler can add a dark contract with a gate to my hand, because this one's going to let me search. And then I am going to activate it, because I'm pretending I'm going first. So I can add the new Griffin to my hand. And then, by using Swirl Slide, along with Griffin, I can perform a fusion summon. Lacking room for camera, but I'm going to summon a Temjin. And then, I'm going to do a Link summon by using the Temjin, along with the Kepler, that goes to the extra deck. So I could summon the Gilgamesh. The Gilgamesh is going to let me set 2 cards to the Pendulum scale, which since my Newton's already on hand, I'm going to have to pick other cards. So I'm going to pick the Reiji so I don't get burned for the 1,000 points, along with a Ragnarok, just for more extensive play. And here's me shuffling it. And then next, I'm going to play the Foolish Burial. So I could send the Lamia to the graveyard. I already said it, so I don't exactly know what I'm doing, but I'm just making plays just to show how complex the deck can be. And then we can now activate. Oh, you do take the 1,000, but this is going to negate it, so just remember that part. Swirl Slide effect. We're going to banish this, so we could summon the Ragnarok. And then Ragnarok summons back a DDDs, which will be Temjin. And then Abyss Ragnarok is going to let you summon Lamia. Yeah, this. And then the Temjin is going to let you summon the Griffin. Griffin will search out for a DD monster, which I'm going to search for Necro Slime. So Necro Slime goes to my hand. So now I can tune the Lamia along with the Temjin that I just used the effect for to summon the Alexander. And now you can Pendulum summon, because you do have another zone to point to, and you have a Pendulum skill 0, so you could at least Pendulum summon the Servant Kepler, so you could summon back Lamia through Alexander, and then perform another synchro play here for Curse King Siegfried. Very difficult to play here. Oh, you're going to send the Necro Slime to the graveyard, so you can summon back Lamia. This is not to trigger any effects. And because your Executive Alexander is generic, you can tune the Lamia. Since you send the Subtle Song to the graveyard, you have to banish it. Use the Kepler along with the Ragnarok. I mean, my bad. The Siegfried. This is so it's in the graveyard, so you could summon another monster to summon the Gust King. And then you can perform a fusion summon by using your Necro Slime, by banishing Gust King along with the Necro Slime. So you can perform another fusion summon. to summon the high executive Temjin. This is so you can now trigger this effect to special summon. Doesn't really matter, but you could summon the Siegfried. And then you can overlay these two to summon an ultimate Doom King, Darkness Armageddon. This is so now your High King Executive Temjin can trigger to special summon this. And then with all that out, you can now just XA summon this. So yeah, here's a big board that I just came up with. I did not exactly know what I was really doing, but here's an example of a DDD deck that you're going to be having a little trouble with coming up with combos and just with effects triggering each other, because there's just a lot going on, and usually the end result looks something like this, I'm not going to lie. And usually if you do make a perfect combo, you will have everything without this, a weak monster on the field. But this is just something I just came up with through the hand I had. And yeah, this is the type of board we got. We got a monster negate, a spell trap negate, Pendulum Monsters cannot be destroyed by card effect, along with a 6k beater on the field as long as you have 3 DDD monsters, and a weak mass monster that your opponent can just run into. So yeah, that's basically the end result for this hand, but it's just an example. So that's it for my DDD deck profile. Go ahead and tell me what you guys think about it below. As you can tell, I made it as anime as possible, having all the main boss monsters in my deck, and basically a pure DDD deck without any hand traps or anything. Besides, this deck kind of lacks room to play a bunch of stuff anyway, and I don't really like playing cards outside the archetype in the deck, so it's just my style because I like to go anime as possible. And as you can tell on the playtest, it's a very combo heavy deck, and I was literally trying to figure out on how to make my combos, because if you want an end result of knowing what your combos is, you have to really play test this a lot and actually practice with it. This deck technically requires a lot of practice, and basically, like I said before in the beginning, every monster that you have and dark contracts can be literally counted as a piece for a combo, and depending on what pieces you get, it turns into a different result. So I didn't really exactly have any idea what I was really going to do, but the end result was, as you can see, was a bunch of boss monsters and one griffin. And yeah, that will happen quite often. So yeah, this deck you will need a lot of practice. But on that, I am still waiting for the Eulogy from Ghosts from the Past. It's been 2 years and we still don't have Eulogy. But once Eulogy comes out, I am definitely going to take out probably a few cards that are considered extra copies or the tech cards, because Eulogy really helps out a lot. First off, it can special summon itself from the Pendulum Zone, and it can manipulate its own level. It could be 6 or 8. That makes it easier to summon the esthetic Caesar and rank 8 place. And it's a pillar, so it's basically another one of those ragey boss monsters because his main boss monsters are pillars for some reason. But anyway, go ahead and tell me what other cards that you would recommend, what other strategies that you could technically recommend for this, because there's a lot of stuff that you could end up playing with this. My main goal is usually try to be anime as possible and summon the 3 portfolio as much as possible, or get the 3 eccentric kings as soon as possible. Just because I like it for anime reasons. And besides, I play this deck mainly for fun, not for competitive reasons. And other than that, see you all next time.